So a big warm welcome to those that have just joined us, waiting for a few more people just to arrive before I hand you over. So the question is, how, when and where do we learn the skills to humanise the workplace? It's my pleasure to introduce you and hand you over to our expert panel today. So please welcome Ed Monk, CEO here at the LPI, David William Hastings at Go1, and Lauren Waldman, Chief Learning Scientist and founder of Learning Pirate. Welcome, panel.
Good morning from Toronto. So nice to see some of my friends here in the audience. Hi, everyone.
Surprise, surprise, Lauren recognizes some people in the audience.
Me too. I recognize some of those names. Hi, Lauren. Hi, David.
Good morning. Good afternoon. So I think we're, I'm a big stick. I don't know about you guys, but as a former teacher, I'm a big stickler on time. So I like to get things going right at the top. Are you, David, are you guys ready to roll?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do this.
All right. So first and foremost, hello, everyone. How are you? And I actually want to just sort of premise this this next 45 minutes by saying that this is a conversation. This is interactive. You are just as part of this as we are, because you've got beautiful brains that have beautiful memories and experiences in them that we'd love to hear about as well. So with that being said, I can see a few of you have already chimed in the chat and have said where you're from. We're going to be using a little bit of the functions here. So just to get us going, question for everyone who's with us today is just really simple. How are you? It's 8 o'clock here in the morning in Toronto. It is absolutely freezing. I'm just getting my bearings, but how are all of you, and how have you been this past year? Are you still working from home? Are you in an office? Are you in a co-working space? How has this environment of yours changed over the course of the last 18 months? Dawn, you're on your third coffee. Amazing. Lena, hello. Oh yes, I'll see you in Sweden in a couple of weeks. Peter's sleepy. I hear ya. Happily working from home. Does anyone have any new coworkers? I have COVID. Colin, oh no. I'm happy that you're joining us here. If you have any brain questions, do ask. Well, okay, so no one's enjoying warm, beachy weather from the looks of it. And over the course of the last 18 months, have you had new coworkers? Have you had new coworkers maybe that needed snacks or diaper changes, or ones that had to be let out every hour to poop? Annie, there we go. Dreaming of the beachy weather. I'm with you, Annie. Me too in Mexico. Michael's got furry new coworkers. Emma's got a new puppy. Emma, leave that off the screen. Otherwise, I'm lost for the rest of it. David, Ed, anything change in your environments over the past year? I know, Ed, I think you said you were back in the office.
Yeah, I'm in the office now, actually. And it's only been recently that we've returned. Also doing face-to-face meetings. We managed to have Learning Live earlier this year. So the last couple of months, I think things have really ramped up. Before that, yeah, not so good. I'm a very social person, as I think you know, Lauren. So being stuck in my house was not so good, but starting to travel into Paris and Barcelona in the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks, things are changing, and fingers crossed, that's a permanent thing. I hope so.
Yeah, I can echo that. It's been a rough 18 months, I think. Not much travel. Christmas alone in Copenhagen was not exactly the most fun in the world, but coming into the new year and more recently able to travel. So I've been in London doing events, and we've had some award ceremonies and stuff like that. It's good to get the cobwebs off and start meeting humans again, and getting that kind of weird feeling you get when you're in other people's presence and meeting new people and new experiences. So yeah, it's good.
Ooh, yeah, and we're going to talk about that because obviously I see that someone's in from Perth. I love Perth, by the way. I spent a great amount of time there. I had my first social event last weekend. So it's very, very different from our geographies. It's what's going on in the world. And, I think that's also part of what we need to discuss when we're talking about learning in the hybrid environment, is that people because of our geographies, we're in different places, not just in our cities, but we're in different places as to where we are still in our pandemic journey. So going to Spain and going all these places sound absolutely lovely to me, but even just getting into the airport in Toronto is nearly impossible at this time. So it's amazing. So another question for everyone, just to kind of keep things moving a bit, but what were some of those? I mean, I have my own place. I live by myself, and I know I had to make some big adjustments myself as well. But as far as your environments went, what adjustments did you feel like you had to make in order to maintain your productivity when it came to just managing and balancing your work and, you know, your personal and your human life? So we know where you were in your environments, but what adjustments then did you have to make to maintain productivity?
I can go first on that while we look at the messages coming through. If you want, Lauren, I'll take that.
That'd be great.
Well, some of those are actually pretty interesting, though. If you want to take a look at those, give me the kids. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I see a side conversation about Rush. There's a whole other conversation. There's a whole other webinar, everyone, about Rush. But yeah, we've got some really good ones coming in. A new home office chair. Kath is saying the space to balance everything. Keep work in a separate room. Lucky to have a spare room to, yeah, Liz, if you were lucky to have a spare room to do that, that definitely helped. Separation of work and private space also live, yeah. Homeschooling was brutal. Yes, Mash. I don't have children of my own, but my sister has 3, and I'm surprised that she doesn't have an IV of alcohol right now. Ed, you were saying, what have you had to do?
For me, yeah. For me, we had to do some tactical things. I think obviously it might be slightly different. As a CEO, you're responsible for all staff, and we have a work anywhere policy now, which was a big change for us. We took some big decisions really early on. We gave private healthcare to all staff. Everybody did mental health first aid training, and I think that was a good move. We'll talk about how that impacted, I guess, but also just some tactical things. We limited internal meetings to 40 minutes. And if we didn't cover that agenda, we'll have another meeting at some point. But it just gave us a 20-minute gap between that and the next one starting at 2. That was important. I think Michelle put in there that she tried to attend non-screen meetings. We really encourage that, you know, and if people can go out for a walk, put their headphones in and attend meetings just through audio, that was good. Encouraging time away to think, actually planning time to think and putting in your calendar, I'm just doing creativity for 2 hours rather than constant tasks and emails, was actually bizarrely important. But yeah, we're back in the office now, 2 days a week for us. And that seems to be the balance that people who are based in the office want. We've gone to both extremes. People want to stay at home, then they really wanted to come back in the office. And the happy medium seems to be Tuesdays and Wednesdays when we socialize our work. The other 3 days, people are getting on with tasks.
I've got, so I got a giggle at Rob. I just saw Robin's comment come up on my screen. The cat made sure to let me know when it was time to stop working and worship him. This is why I don't like that. These are amazing, everyone. The self-awareness here is absolutely fantastic. I love someone was in the garden, going to different rooms, converting spaces. Yeah, we kind of did what we needed to do. David, anything on your end?
I was actually surprised by Ed's comment regarding the video-free meetings. I still struggle with that right now. I still join meetings and feel awkward taking the video off. I'm really that's yeah, definitely. It's not a culture thing at all. I think it's just me. I just feel awkward without the video on, even though it would be nice to sit in bed and do your meetings for a few hours.
Let's not pretend that we all haven't done that. We've seen the Zoom meeting fails. We know what it looks like when someone stands up by accident.
So it's always only this shot, isn't it? You can't see my pajamas.
So I'm going to ask, we know that in our environments, there was so much going on, but it wasn't just our environments, right? So it was everything that was going on with us cognitively, emotionally, all of the things. So whether or not you want to say yes in the chat box, or if you want to raise your hand, I can't see everybody on the screens, but we'll acknowledge if you do raise your hands. But I'm going to shoot through just a bunch of questions. And if this was you, go ahead and put a yes in the chat box, or just like literally raise your hand. Okay, so raise your hand or use the, use the chat box if you slept less or if you slept more. I see a bunch of hands going up. Here we go. Okay, did you eat more or eat less? Oh my God. Everyone's just gonna be applauding like crazy at this point. Okay, we know that you found it a little bit hard to focus at time. Did you lose motivation, productivity? Yeah, big yes. Did you have no idea what was going on some days? Just like kind of woke up in a haze? Yeah, big yes. Yeah, still a problem, disconnected, no idea. Okay, and then last one here. Did you have days where you felt happy, and sad, and angry, and confused, but all in the same day? Okay, so we're like, yeah, definitely, often. Okay, so we're all of the above. Yeah, sometimes it felt like we were going through the absolute gauntlet of emotions. And obviously, our brains could only take so much, right? We are prediction-making machines. And when our brains are in a state where we cannot foresee what's coming up next, it gets a little bit much, right? Our cognitive functions or emotional functions start to sort of clash with one another. So I don't like to lecture all too much. I like to have fun. So I thought, David, Ed, what do you think? Should we do some experimentation here?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's go for it. All right, so I'm just going to, just bear with me just for one moment. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Everyone out there in that gorgeous audience, how do you feel about having have a little tickle of your brains? Can we experiment a little bit? See what those brains are up to? I'm going to get Ed and David to mind the chat and make sure it's okay. Crack on. Yes, I love that. That's a big yar right there. You betcha. All right, let's do it, everyone. Oh, what a great, cute, I love this. Let's do this. All right. And Scott, if you could just give me a thumbs up or yeah, you're all good. I'm just going to assume that everything is okay on that end.
All good, Lauren.
That's sharing.
Yep.
That's sharing, yeah.
Good to go.
Okay, so what you see on your screens right now is these are real brains. These are image brains, all the different gorgeous colors. We call this a rainbow, and it represents all these phenomenal different networks that connect different parts and functions of your brain. So I thought, why not? Let's see what we can activate in some of yours right now. So on the next screen, you're going to see a bunch of words come up. And all I want you to do is not read the word, but identify the color of the word. Now, if you would like to unmute, by all means do so. If you would like to put your videos on, by all means do so. But here we go. So whenever you're ready, just remember, your task is to read the color of the ink of the word, not the word itself. Here we go. I can hear David and Ed whispering. Okay. So that would have looked like from, laughing would have been green, puppies would have been orange or yellow, concerts would have been purple. If you haven't figured this out, this is a list of some of my favorite things. Okay, so we're going to repeat this one more time, exactly the same, as fast as you can. Identify the color of the ink, not the word. Here we go, round two.
Green, blue, pink, yellow, yellow, red, purple, purple, green.
Meepa. Can I get a bonus point for Meepa?
All right, if you've unmuted, I'm going to ask you to put yourself back on mute again, just so we can continue on. So this is a classic neuropsychological experiment. It's called the Stroop Experiment. And what it's basically showing us is that when there is a conflict between the sources of information in your brains, when two things are trying to happen at once, you get interference. And when you get interference, it causes you to have to slow down. And then obviously it takes a lot of more effort for you to do things. Now let's go back. We're talking about our environments, our emotions, all of the things that we've been dealing with in the last 18 months. Our cognitive function has been under a lot of stress. Our brains have been under a lot of stress. And with that, we do get a little bit slower. And because we were trying to do so many things at once, we started to lose function. Now, as many of you have seen over the course of the last, I guess, even 6 months, here in North America, we're calling it the Great Resignation. I have another words that I like to use for that. But we've been seeing this uptake of like high attrition numbers. And I just wanted to take just a quick moment here to identify two very important things when it comes to mental health, your psychology and your brains, because a lot of people don't really understand what the difference between stress and burnout is. Now, stress is really noticeable. So you're going to see a couple of things come up on your screen here. It is this over-engagement, is emotional reactivity, it's hyperactivity, and it's obsessiveness. So you have like this urgency. Now, stress is your pathway that gets you to burnout. Now, in the chat, give me some ideas here, because when I saw all of these for the first time, sort of in a big, and there's a lot more than these, by the way, but when I saw these, I'm like, okay, a very distinct movie character is coming up in my mind. So if you had to associate stress with a movie character, go ahead, put it in the chat. Who would that movie character be? I love when people, Jim Carrey, Lisa, that's not the first time I've heard that one. Okay, Mr. Bean, I love Mr. Bean. Stressed Eric, I don't know who that is, Rebecca, but that sounds like it could be really funny. Okay, so it's not Mr. Bean, it's not Jim Carrey. Basil Fawlty.
Great shout.
Sheldon Cooper, David, we got that one the last time. Okay, so clearly I go to a weird place because it was hyperactivity. Forrest, come, Caroline. Forrest was so lovely. Sheldon for sure. Okay. So obsessiveness and hyperactivity was what my brain went here. I was like, so I know this is a really creepy picture, and from now on, all you're going to see is people walking around looking like Gollum. Yeah, Gollum, Michelle. So if stress is Gollum, right, very noticeable and hyperactive and obsessed, then when we get to burnout, like I said, burnout is this aspect of it, is the disengagement, it's helplessness. You pretty much are at the point where your motivation has gone down the toilet and you're done. Burnout really is this state of emotional and physical mental exhaustion. And typically when you get to that point, you've already passed the point of you being able to have your own coping mechanisms to get you through it. So whereas we look at stress as having too much, we see as burnout as not having enough. And so obviously, this was my response to that. If Gollum was like, my precious, at this point in burnout, he's like, take the ring, I don't care, I'm over it. So I'm going to stop sharing at that point, but this is sort of like your, I call it a pirate service announcement, is if you feel yourself getting to, already stressed, we want to really, really be mindful to understand that if we keep going on this pathway, because the pandemic did push many people past their limits, but when we get there, you're past the limits of your own coping mechanisms. So we really need to be cautious. And that's part of the reason why we're talking about all of this today. So thank you for letting me play with your brains. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. Ed and David, if you want to make any comments on that while I get reassembled here.
Well, I think it's a big deal, actually. I know we're looking at the sort of comedic side of it, but I know for large companies, burnout is now a critical issue. It's an economical issue for them. So this is something that needs addressing. It's not a luxurious thing to look at when we've got time. It's now a serious issue. Certainly, we're seeing cases increase exponentially in middle management, excessive responsibility. So I'm speaking to one of the biggest tech companies in the world at the moment about exactly that and how to solve that problem. So yeah, I mean, I can relate to it on a personal level as well, just to personalize it. I really struggle working from home on a day-to-day basis. I thrive off a team and enjoy being around people. And it can feel like you're not getting anywhere because you're not getting those reactions and that support from just casual conversations. So, it registers with me, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I can tell you from the scientific community, we saw numbers over 9 months starting last November that were absolutely unprecedented when it came to science. 98, well, we said 98%, the numbers actually reflected 100% of people expressing some sort of mental deficits, whether that be depression, burnout, stress. We do not see these numbers in science. It was absolutely unprecedented. And obviously we're dealing with the ramifications of that now. So yes, it is a rather serious topic. Because we're talking about learning, and David, if you want to sort of throw to this question, and everybody in the chat as well, let me know, your answers to this as well. But when it comes to learning, because, we're talking about learning and conditions that didn't exist before, what did you learn about yourself? As a thinking and a feeling human this past year, what did you learn about yourself that you might not have been conscious about before?
Yeah, I saw a comment in the chat there, and it was from Rob, and it says needing to look after ourselves before we can look after others. And for me, I found that when I've been able to speak out loud with friends, or I have the very fortunate reality of both my sister and my mother being counsellors. So I am able to pick up the phone and speak to two women in my life who can give me some good advice. But what you find is that actually the ability to listen to people and just to be heard was the first part of my kind of understanding and learning. Because when you hear other people articulate how they're feeling and you actually listen, you start to realize that you're not the only one feeling like that. And it was then that I realized that there must be a whole lot of science and people that have this same, that are addressing the same issues. So that's where my learning started. And then working my way back through how were humans, where did the spark of creation come from, and how does the human brain work, and working my way back out that way. It was quite a deep learning curve, but I'm glad I did it.
We've got some beautiful, beautiful things coming up in the chat from patients of Robin was, I'm really okay being alone. And that's quite insightful. That is hard. Resilience from Colin. Resilience is something we think that, we see it online, we see it in training. You don't buy resilience. Resilience is not something that we just achieve and it's done. Our line of resilience always keeps moving forward and forward and forward as we keep going and we keep experiencing. So it's something that we keep building as we continue on in our journeys of life. Finding balance, Ruby was saying, I think, yeah, Ruby, so many people had to figure out the balance as well. Annie was saying she preferred to be less social. And you know what? There were people who absolutely thrived in isolation. It wasn't just people who were suffering. There were people who absolutely thrived. Now, the opposite side of this to some people as well, maybe some of your coworkers, is now they're having a hard time reintegrating. And we'll talk about that a little bit. More time listening, David. Some Peters is sort of resonating with you on that one. Chris, I'm very happy you said that it is not okay to work 10 hours a day. It is not okay to work 14 hours a day, which is sometimes what I was doing. We saw a lot of behavioral shifts with middle management trying to keep up with senior management, and then employees trying to keep up with their managers when times and working hours started to shift. So yeah, these are absolutely brilliant. So as we continue this conversation now, I guess my next logical question to everyone is, we identified these things that we did to help ourselves, things that we may not have been conscious about that we now have brought to our own consciousness. But this to make my days and humans, and by observing your colleagues, and anything that when you look around now that you think, we really need to learn this, and what would those things be? And Ed and David, go ahead and chime in as well if you have thoughts on that.
I think probably the big thing that we did as a company, and it came from staff actually straight away, was what I mentioned earlier. Everybody did the mental health first aid course. And if I can pick one thing out that it gave us, it made us way more empathetic about each other. We found out things about each other that we didn't know. And actually we became much closer to each other, even though we were working in isolation away from each other. We became much closer as a group. And it's a lot of staff at the LPI. who maybe haven't even met each other ever. So that was extremely important to the company. And for me, in my role, it definitely made me more empathetic. My outlook changed. And we had to change priorities really for a period. Actually, it was all about looking after our people and trying to do the right thing for them. I contacted staff on a regular basis just for chats with no agenda, no purpose. And that was great for me. I found out way more about what was going on, just having 10, 15-minute meetings. So I think we built a better connection and we were more empathetic through doing that.
David, before I go to you, I just want to acknowledge something that Donna had said here because it's very important. Donna, I want to acknowledge that there's no real desire to get back out, do your work from home. This is far larger of a problem than people realize right now. For those who are really in heavy lockdowns, what they were experiencing, like I said, some people very much thrived in the lockdown experience. Some people were anxious, like myself, like Ed, social beings, we like to get out there. What was happening then was that there was an anxiety that was slowly building this as things were starting to reopen and you could go to more places, because essentially, let's take this back to science, let's take this back to your brains, because you weren't exposed to as much senses, you weren't processing as much in the environment because you were in your home environments for a majority of the time. The sensory overwhelm and the amount that your brain is now having to work was quite extreme for some people, which meant that, and I will say this exhaustingly, but your brain requires a lot of energy. Okay, the currency is energy. It requires a lot of power, and energy is the currency it runs on. So all of a sudden, when we're now processing a lot of sounds around us, even going back into the office, not used to having people walking around us, or just the sound of a coffee machine going off, or the coffee, whatever that looks like, the processing became a lot more. And then we add in things like physical touch. Now, some people had experienced very extreme lockdowns. They could not see anybody, could not go anywhere. And that first shake of a hand or a hug released so much oxytocin in the system that it was beautiful and was wonderful, but they were exhausted. The chemical release literally created exhaustion that could not only last for an hour or two, it could last for a day or two. So being mindful of everything that we're now processing as well. I see lots going on in the chat. I'm going to take a look while David, if you want to chime in on this.
I think time management is coming up a lot here. And it's not the simple case of letting work bleed into personal life and bleeding into home. It was more that it's easy just to keep going with something when you enjoy some of your work or a project. It's easy just to keep going. You find that actually you're just not sleeping properly. It's so easy just to wake up and start working without looking after yourself and taking a walk or stuff like that. So I learned, it took me way longer than I should have, but that balance of being able to switch off and actually go outside for a walk, and proper exercise and things like that. I still haven't mastered the exercise. I'm not going to lie to anyone, but I'm working on it.
David, did you manage to separate work from personal stuff though? Like when you switch the laptop off, are you a kind of at 5 o'clock, that's it?
Yeah, I'm a wake up at 5:30, do as much work as I humanly can, and then switch off in the afternoon. So for me, right. Copenhagen we were quite lucky here. And I think one of the other things I'd learned quite quickly as well is that my experience of a lockdown and what I'm going through is very, very different from what people all over the world are going through, especially when, some places like where Lauren is and my colleagues in Australia, it's just been lockdown after repeated lockdown. And so when I can turn up with a smile on my face because I've been out for a walk, there's a lot of people that couldn't leave their homes. And so you find that when people say, oh, how are you? I was having to tone down the enthusiasm and tone down the I was actually faking it for the worse so that I could be more relatable to my colleagues who were probably struggling more than I was.
We were struggling. And I said, that was something, so this is really interesting because whereas you, David, you were trying to tone things down to not show your enthusiasm, on my side of things, I was having to hold in my resentment. It was very resentful for me to hear colleagues when I say, the very lovely conversation, normal conversation. What did you do on the weekend? And they're like, we went out for brunch and we had coffee and and I'm sitting here in Toronto going, we haven't been allowed to do anything. And I'm like, I want to be happy for you, but I love you. You're my friends. I hate you. Like, you know what a restaurant sounds like and smells like. And this went on for months and months and months. And like, you know, David, like you said, our colleagues and our friends in Australia as well had it pretty horrifically. So, and that's still happening. We're still, you know, we're not out of it yet, which is the unfortunate thing. Is we are going to be taking this into the new year, and it's something that you know, we're tracking as far as the research goes of how people are doing. But yeah, I'm just sort of taking a look through the chats as well. It seems like everyone's done a lot for themselves, which is really wonderful. And it looks like you're also transferring these things over to your working environments, which is really great. Was there anything, sorry guys, since I'm just going through and catching up in the chats, was there anything, I see someone's brought up the Pomodoro technique has been brought up twice. Yes, the Pomodoro, a little cooking timer, 20 minutes. It's good to sort of get you going.
I think from a learning perspective, one of the things I have realized actually is that as we're taking training in, one of the reasons I'm passionate about learning is that you can learn something in the office and work and take it into your personal life. You learn how to listen better, you learn how to have a better conversation. These are things you can take back into your social life, improve your social life as well. But through this experience, I've been learning how to manage my temper or my energy levels or my body clock from a work perspective and translating that back into my personal life. I never thought that I'd be learning these kind of techniques and then, you know, I've actually started my proper good mental health routine, and like all of these things are actually inspired by the fact it's the work that's causing me this stress. It wasn't a personal decision, it was a work informed decision. I think that's quite interesting because a lot of the tools and the techniques I learned came from work. They didn't come from me going on the internet and Google.
I find that really interesting, actually. I agree with you. It's been a period where I know I have, and a lot of people I know have had to take very practical approaches to mental health rather than, you know, cheer up and make yourself feel better or go and have a cup of tea and dismissing it. It's a conscious decision to actually try and do something about it practically, which is not really me. You know, I like to be intuitive and spontaneous and reactive and, you know, do things based on my emotion. But that was not going to work, nor for a lot of people. And there were varying levels of, you know, bad situations happening over the last 18 months. I agree that, yeah, taking practical steps, whilst it's uncomfortable and it doesn't necessarily feel intuitively right at the beginning, has paid a lot of dividends for me and a number of staff at the LPI.
I want to take a moment to acknowledge Glynis, and I do hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Glynis, first of all, my condolences. We said that you've lost your mother. Grief, wow. Grief is a heavy topic. And whether you had lost somebody during the pandemic, it's hard enough to lose somebody to begin with, but to lose somebody if you can't get to them or you can't be present with them. Glynis, I sympathize, I really do. I've had loss over this. I'm sure there's other people as well who have lost people. Grief is something that we're dealing with not only from the loss of people, we're also dealing with it from the loss of life in general. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I'm sure your mother was just a beautiful, beautiful soul. And oh, Glynis, hi. I just saw you pop up there. Hi.
Yeah, I'm awfully sorry. The telephone company is going to cut off our internet any minute now. So I'm going to have to leave, I'm afraid. But thank you very much for your thoughts.
My absolute pleasure. We'll see you again soon, Glynis. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So yeah, I think that's another thing that we need to acknowledge as well is, and David has heard me speak about this, the research in my data is now pointing from the behavioral sciences teams. People are experiencing this more right now because we want this to be over, but we're carrying it into another year. We're heading towards the end of the year, and we know that we're not leaving it behind, we're taking it with us. So it's what I'm just calling pandemic Groundhog Day. It has been quite challenging. So just to acknowledge that people are in different levels and there are a variety of different levels of grief happening. You know, Ed took the time to make sure that his staff had the training and really got some support there. What we do know in the world as well, there would never be enough psychologists, psychiatrists, and occupational therapists to manage what's happening right now. There just isn't. And they're suffering themselves as well. I sat on, actually I didn't sit on, I was one of the partners for one of the largest summits in the world that was talking about physician burnout. So this is a very real thing within the clinical side as well. Our physicians are burnt out, and our psychologists, our OTs, they're all burnt out as well. So we've got a lot to learn, but we can definitely learn it. And that's why the science nerds like myself, we're coming forward to help as well. So here to answer all of those brain questions. And so many wonderful, wonderful things coming up in the chats. I see someone mentioned something about languishing. Yes, languishing became a hot term. Colin, I see that I just scrolled through the chats there as well. Colin, again, condolences for the loss of your father. Oh yeah, so you could actually attend. That's wonderful. I attended things unfortunately through Zoom, and it was what we could do, but it obviously wasn't the ideal of what we wanted to do. So as we kind of sort of, coming to the end, because I want to make sure we've got time to chat and answer any questions, but because we're talking about learning, right? This all comes down, we've just spent the last 40 minutes discussing all these things that we've learned together and that we've sort of seen in our organizations learn. But I guess the question I have for everyone is, when and where do you think we should be learning? Like, these are skills, these are behaviors, these are our abilities. They're emotional sometimes, they're vulnerable. So you can throw it in the chat, but should we be learning this at work? Should we be learning these things during work hours? Should we, now scientifically, it's helpful to co-regulate with people, but we need to learn how to do that first. So what are your thoughts? Do organizations need to create the time and the space for people to learn what they need, or should they be doing it within that time during the working hours? What do you all think? Create the time from Donna. This is good. We're getting some variety here. Nando saying at work, it benefits productivity. Okay. Should be a mix. Okay. So we've got like a few people saying we need to be able to give the space and the time to do it. There is 100% benefit, Liz, for people co-learning and co-regulating. David?
We've seen a lot of examples of these tools being built so that people could use it in the workplace, but equally they could take it home and use it with their family. So it's built in such a way that actually you can take this away, and here's the version for your children, and here's the version for your partner, and here's the toolkit that you can even take into your home life if you want to. So yeah, we've seen lots of examples of that where they're built to apply to both use cases.
Yeah, and Lisa was just saying, like, life is a learning experience, things that, and you're right. I think what people forget, we are learning machines. We are literally designed. You are learning all day, every day, whether you know it or whether you like it or not. Your brains are doing all of it all the time. It's whether and when we are intentional and strategic about it, when that changes. Seems like most people in the chat here are sort of like, it's a 50-50. And you're right, Dawn, it is not a one size fits all. And if anyone who tells you that learning this stuff is easy, they're wrong. Flat down. Ask any learning scientist will say learning is not easy. It is meant to be hard because you are physically changing your brain from the inside and experiencing the results on the out.
One of the first things that Satya Nadella did when he joined Microsoft was to say he wanted to build a learn-it-all culture rather than a know-it-all culture, which I thought was amazing. And he really does try and provide employees with the freedom to learn. We know that psychological safety is one of the big reasons for successful teams, but people are having to live it now. And certainly business leaders are having to lead by example, I think. I would also add in trusting employees and less micromanagement, just letting them do what they want to do and believe in them and encourage them. That's really difficult, but I think that needs to be done. And I think some of the things you spoke about at the beginning, Lauren, and people were talking about in chat, about stress and maybe excessive routine and unsupported environments, they are the biggest inhibitors to curiosity. And more than ever, we need curiosity. So I would like to see companies engender and propagate curiosity much more than they do at the moment.
I could not agree with you more. I as a human and just a regular old girl, curiosity is my kryptonite. And it's not just about learning. It's not just about brain. I am like, if someone says what's down there, I will walk down that alley just to find out what's down that alley.
Yeah,
got me into a lot of trouble in high school.
Well, somebody's put in the chat there, trust needs a different management style. One of the things that I hated that I read about during the pandemic was screen time management. When you can monitor when people have left the screen, that's just awful.
Oh, I think.
Oh, not sure if we've lost
Ed's in the matrix.
Let's say the other way if we can.
Oh, you're back. You're in the matrix there, Ed, for half a moment.
We lost you awful, my friend.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
That's what I was saying.
Yes. All of it. Sorry, I'm just reading. I've got Marcus, work from home challenge doorbell. Oh, okay. That happens. Yeah. So it seems that we've all come to the conclusions that, there should be a really good balance between all of this. And I'm 100% in agreement with you. I think one of the largest organizational faults that we saw on our end of things, colleagues, and we are training people on brain states, how to understand your brain, how to understand emotional reactivity, your cognitive function, your executive function. And, we got to a point where we decided as a team that we thought we were going to advocate for the employees themselves and say, we don't actually think that this is a good idea for people to be learning this with one another in a working environment in the times. People need to be able to process this first on their own and then bring it into the working environment, because I don't know about all of you here, but the last thing that I want to do is to either, cry my face out or, go all Hulk, Incredible Hulk, when I'm with like 5, 6, 7 to 10 people in a room. So first we learn ourselves, and then we can transfer into an environment where we do not trigger people, where we do not set everybody off. And if we do, we know how to handle that and manage that more effectively through empathy, through trust, and through vulnerability. 100%. Thanks, Curry. So just as we've got just a few moments left here to wrap up, I think, that's the bulk of what I wanted to sort of cover off here. I think I'm good to open up to any open discussion and questions. Ed, David, you good with that?
Absolutely, yeah. Great comment from Arif just there. If you wanted to pick up on that, Lauren, actually.
Don't micromanage. Ooh. Oh, Arif, you're speaking my language. I worked on a cruise ship for a while, so. So the U.S. Navy replaced the usual practice of giving him orders to people with new practices. Subordinates coming to him. Oh, I like that. Good captain.
There's a great story. There's a great book about that as well. Can't recall the name.
Without no pun intended, of all the organizations, all the jobs that I have ever had around the world, the best demonstration of leadership that I ever had was when I was working on the cruise ship. That captain just commanded. It didn't have to command. He earned, and we were happy to do what was necessary only for the operations and for each other. But, we are stuck on a tin can with one another for months at a time. Mentioned co-regulation. Could I say more about that? Yes, I can say more about that. So so when we regulate, right? So when we learn to emotionally regulate, which is, by the way, incredibly challenging. What I'm talking about when we're talking about a regulation, we know that you probably know, there are lots of different little pieces going on up in that brain. None of them work independently. They all work, harmoniously with one another. One very powerful part of your brain, as you probably all experienced at some point, is your emotional processing centers. Now, when we are learning to train that particular part of your brain, it can be very challenging because it's a very powerful part that has the ability to take the executive function offline. So when we're talking about regulating that, we're talking about being self-aware to monitor and then be able to calm things down. You don't shut anything off in the brain, that's not possible, but we're able to dim it or calm it down. Now we're able to go into a space where we can co-regulate with one another. So if I now have a bit more of a handle, I call it joining forces with my brain, then I'm now able to go into an environment or a social situation where if someone else is at a level that I'm not at, I can help the co-regulation. So I can help balance that out as opposed to meeting them where they are. So sometimes you see screaming matches between people. I'm getting angry, I'll get angrier, we match that. Instead, we're able to now join with one another to be empathetic, as Ed was mentioning, and to be vulnerable and to trust, and to then say, okay, I can bring myself to a level where we can now work with one another. And that's, to me, is the co-regulation aspect of it. It's not matching or topping. It's being able to be in the same room with one another and almost hold space and support. You guys are, I'm going to mute myself just for a moment because I've got a very large truck about to go by. It's going to be very disruptive.
Interesting. We're seeing lots of these topics like authenticity, and we talk about bringing your true self to work and showing your true self, or listening. A lot of people don't actually know, aren't even comfortable doing these things in their home life, like their personal selves. So a lot of this training has actually been quite new for people, even on a personal level, to what is it to sit with yourself and ask yourself some of these deep questions, and what is it to sit in silence for a few minutes? Not many people have done that in their entire lives, let alone at work.
And it's challenging.
No.
Everyone thinks that meditation is so easy. It's not.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had such a long period of self-reflection before, most of our lives.
Oh, Ed, you're choppy again.
Lauren, there's a question in there for a recommendation for a book as well, aimed at you.
Oh, yeah, I just saw that. Lali, if you want to connect with me actually, I'll throw my LinkedIn profile, connect with me there, and I'm happy to share resources and any research that I've got. Absolutely. So I know are we at the hour or the quarter to the hour?
We're just coming up just past quarter to the hour, Lauren. So if there are any more questions for the panel, just pop them in there. I'm sure we've got time for one more before we end today's event.
I'm just gonna pop my LinkedIn in there, so if anyone has any further questions. Ooh, Rob, I love that. The pace at which we run at sometimes does not allow us to stop and see the benefit of what we just did. You're absolutely right, Rob. I am an advocate. If I could teach the world one theory, one skill, it would be that of metacognition. Metacognition allows us to be able to see when we need to be in the present moment, to be able to hear those beautiful thinking thoughts that we're having before they get too far ahead, to be able to sense in our bodies the reactivity that is happening because our brain has been triggered emotionally. Yes, we do run at too quick of a pace, but when we train the brain to be in states where we can slow down a little bit and be in the present moment, as you know, hokey as it sounds, awareness is a massive first step to being able to regulate and then monitor ourselves. Oh, this is an interesting question. Ed or David, what can you cover in an audio only meeting? First, I just want to say I love audio only meetings because it allows your brain to like tune off some of the resources and focus.
Yeah, I mean, when I mentioned it earlier in the meeting, it was mainly around just giving people a break from the screen time. So some meetings are just chats and you don't need to be looking directly at the screen. One of the issues we have with screen meetings is it's very difficult to talk. And if I do this now and then be thinking and looking away, that can feel a bit odd. Whereas in a human environment, that can feel normal to just be looking away. So you find yourself staring and also seeing yourself, which you don't normally see when you're in a normal environment. So it was just giving people a break from the screens and they could catch up with each other, just have a chat and be out and about walking with their AirPods in. So that was the thinking behind it.
Katie,
yeah, absolutely. In the park.
Sorry, Ed, I just saw Katie. Katie, that's a great question. I wonder if people toggle between stress and burnout, if it's more linear. Once you hit burnout, you know. Stress is, your stress levels will fluctuate and you can go in and out of levels of stress. But once you hit burnout, you've pretty much lost the mechanisms that allow you to cope. So that's when you are completely dysregulated. And stress is very physical. And then burnout combines the mental, the physical, all of it together. So yeah, it's once you hit the wall of burnout, you're past the level of how much stress you could take. That was a really great question. Thanks, Katie.
Can I just ask you as well? I'd also wondered what your thoughts were on more like acute trauma and where that plays into how your brain processes stress when it's an acute experience.
That's a whole other lecture, Katie. It also depends on whether or not the trauma is being triggered by past experience. So if something else has been released in, from your memory banks that is now adding on to that, why don't you, we'll do an off chat, because it's an important question to answer, but yeah, it's a long one to answer. But yeah, I'd say anything that was also pre-existing, if it was also triggered on top of everything else, it's going to definitely prolong the experience.
We've thought about that a lot in terms of our diversity work and acutely traumatic experiences of inclusion. And so that's where it's coming from. Thank you.
No, do reach out. I'm working with some groups here in Toronto that are experiencing the exact same thing. We've got nonprofit organizations who their employees are those who are immigrants who have experienced traumas, but they're trying to help new immigrants who have landed. So there's a lot of trauma sharing that we're working with. So reach out. I'd be happy to share with you. And to all my nature people, I am the biggest tree hugger you'll ever meet. So yes, all the tree hugging. Oh, Katie, you're a Torontonian. Hey now. All right. Anything else coming up there? Any closing thoughts from Ed, David?
No, I think you captured everything really. It's been a really great session, and in the spirit of kind of openness and psychological safety, it's been great to see everybody get involved in it. Thanks for hosting it, Lauren. Really interesting.
Can we talk about Rush now? Sure. One of the greatest drummers alive or dead. Yes, Rush was Rush. Rush, Bryan Adams. Do you want to just throw all the Canadian stereotypes out there? You want to talk about maple syrup? Hockey. Thank you, everyone. Wherever you are in the day, have a wonderful Canadian tuxedo with a plaid shirt, root sweatpants. I love how we've only got 2 Canadians. I think there's only 2 Canadians on this calling it. Somehow we get to dominate.
We always do. We're classic oversharers and all of that.
That's true.
I apologize profusely.
I think, Ed, you knew my whole history of life within 30 minutes of meeting me, right?
I remember that, and I know Katie as well. I can definitely say that's true of her. So yeah, it's been really useful. Thank you very much. Nice to see your face, Robin, as well. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, everyone.
Any final thoughts, David?
No, I'd say thank you everyone for sharing. We can't do this without the sharing, and we talk about vulnerability a lot, and it's an easy topic to kind of go, oh, you should be more vulnerable in the workplace, but it's not an easy thing to do. And to open up in front of strangers about experiences and letting us discuss them and letting us play brain experiments with you is a interesting way to spend an hour. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
I would like to ask everyone to keep joining us. Whether it's if you see Ed doing something or David or myself, come back. I find that part of the problem with learning is that it becomes, oh, okay, I did that. It's over. That hour was great. Come back. I love seeing when we've got the same people in the audience, because it means that we're just keep learning and we can keep drawing on the previous experiences in our memories. So it's always a delight to see the same people come again and contribute, because we just keep social learning with one another. So I definitely look forward to seeing you all again. And did I just say y'all? Oh, oof. Oh,
right. Okay, that's quite enough now.
And done. And we're done.
Overload.
All right, Scott, do you want to wrap us up?
Sure, thank you. Just a big thank you to our panel today. A big thank you to Ed, David and Lauren sharing their insights and knowledge. I hope you've enjoyed today's Learning Live digital event. It's been my pleasure to host you and the panel. So I'd just like to wish you all a great afternoon. Our next session will be next week on the 30th of November at 1 p.m, where we'll be joined by Working Transitions, where they'll be looking and talking about reach, return on investment and removing bias and the benefits of blended coaching. So again, I hope you found today really insightful. Today's recording will be available later on this afternoon, as are all of our Learning Live events are available. So just pop yourselves back over to www.learninglive.com/digital, where you can register for up and coming events. I've been your host today, Scott Shepherd. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, everyone. Bye-bye.
Oh, it's good to see you too. Robin.
I'm trying to unmute myself. Oh my God. I was like, I'm sure I know Lauren. I'm sure I knew Lauren. And then as soon as I saw you on there, I was like, oh my God, that's so funny.
Hey, girl.
I was just